Hi, I'm Matt Collins. I'd like to welcome you to Bob Weber Auto Mart on Douglas Avenue here in Racine, across from Douglas Park. We specialize in 1-year-old, low mileage, almost new cars. And if you'd like to stop by and see them, or see them on our website, bobweberautomart.com, we could save you between $5,000 and $10,000 on your next almost new car purchase.
I'm Michael Burke, and this is Money Talks. Hi, today my guest is Aina Vilumsons, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Procurement Institute in Milwaukee. This is a topic, I have to confess, I've written a total of one story in my life about, and I've been trying very hard to kind of bone up on this topic, so you'll have to help me a lot. Aina, thanks for being on the show, and the reason we're having you on the show today is, as you know, is because WPI very recently established a small presence in the new Launchbox space at 141 Main Street, the State and Main building. And I know at the moment you're having yourself or someone else here one day a week. Is it always the same day or not?
No, it is not. We try to meet the needs of the customer or the client.
Okay.
So we try to be very flexible at that.
Okay.
I'm down here today.
Yeah.
Because of today's
Doing
conversation.
the show here. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're flexible.
Okay, good to know, and we'll give contact information later on in the show, so companies would be able to set up a sit down with you or somebody from the institute. Why don't you give a little quick history? I'm going to use WPI for Wisconsin
Absolutely.
Procurement Institute. It's
Absolutely.
a lot fewer syllables. WPI actually has a very local history. Why don't you tell about that?
WPI started as the under Les Aspen in 1987. He's our roots down here in Racine. The institute moved to Milwaukee.
He was then a congressman.
He was then a congressman from the 1st District. And I believe it's 1993 he moved to the Pentagon as the Secretary of Defense.
But wait, his idea was Wisconsin wasn't
bringing more defense dollars to Wisconsin.
Yeah, and so you established the Aspen Procurement Institute at that time.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And it was actually located in Racine.
It was located in Racine.
And you were saying then in '93, what happened?
He became Secretary of Defense, moved over to Washington. The institute continued for a few years under his name, then changed name to Wisconsin Procurement Institute.
Because there was
up to Milwaukee. There was a little conflict of interest there.
Or at least an appearance of
Correct. And then they moved up to Milwaukee, up to Wauwatosa, the Research Park, Milwaukee County Research Park.
And how long have you been with WPI, and how did you get into this business?
I've been with WPI 17 years. Prior to this, I worked for a small defense contractor in Milwaukee, manufacturing. And that's where I learned about federal contracting, how this works, and saw the opportunity when the Institute had an opening and been there ever since.
The WPI is a nonprofit. Why don't you tell how it's funded?
WPI is a 501c3 funded in part by the Department of Defense. Matching funds are provided by the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, a great partner. And then we do get some private donations, less than 5%, 3-4%.
Why is the Department of Defense so heavily involved in the funding of it? Is that one of the main places where companies do business?
The Department of Defense needs a solid supply chain. Small businesses are the gold in that supply chain. So in order to help small businesses meet the criteria and the demands of a Defense Department contract and federal contracts in general, they started this program 28 years ago. And it has been very solid ever since. It's one of those programs that Congress has been and Senate has been approving year after year after year, and has been a growing program.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you give some numbers now? The amount of business that companies, let's, I guess, limit it to Wisconsin, but not necessarily. Give some numbers about how much business is done with the federal government in Wisconsin, in Racine County, maybe nationwide, and where those dollars go.
Overall, from the large national perspective, we're talking over $500 billion in past years. As we all read in the newspaper now, that number is going to be going down and has been going down. Mm-hmm. Wisconsin is at about as far as performing contracts in the state of Wisconsin, we're at over $3 billion, and as far as signing contracts in Wisconsin, we're at just under $4 billion.
So why don't you explain the difference there? Signing
is the company is signing the contract is based here in Wisconsin. Not necessarily all the work is done in Wisconsin. Contracts that are signed here in Wisconsin, not necessarily all the work is done here in Wisconsin. So there's a slight difference in that number, but it's between $3 and $4 billion. And
is there one number or the other that you usually use, like actual
we try
dollars?
To qualify that number because there is a difference. For example, C&H, a large presence here in Racine. C&H does not sign all their contracts. Parent is a foreign company, so the contracts aren't necessarily signed.
I think that's a good lead in to what types of things are being supplied, let's say from Wisconsin to the federal government, and maybe give some local examples, such as, why don't you start with C&H?
C&H is one of the largest contractors in the area here. Just one step back, Racine receives about $16 million federal dollars last year in procurement.
Racine County?
Racine County.
16
million, okay. Correct. And ranked, I believe it was 13. Let me just check my numbers here. So Racine is doing relatively well. Racine, C&H is the number one, receiving just under $4 million. C&H does heavy equipment for the government, mostly Defense Department.
Construction equipment.
Construction equipment, that type of thing. Second would be Runsheimer out of Waterford.
I wouldn't have guessed that one.
They're a quieter company. They do a lot of research, statistical work, that type of thing. They're just under $3 million. Next would be MGA Research Corporation. They're located in Burlington.
Not familiar with them.
They're located. They have one of their facilities here in Wisconsin. They're an out-of-state company. They do crash testing. Their largest contract is from the Department of Transportation.
Crash testing?
Crash testing.
Do you know of what kinds of vehicles?
No. This is relatively recent.
Oh.
So, but what this shows too is there's a diversity of types of federal dollars coming to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Traditionally, we think of Oshkosh, in the trucks, the military vehicles. It really is. There's quite a diversity of dollars that come both to the Racine area and to the state in general. I mean, we talked yesterday too a little bit. There's a food company that gets substantial dollars here. That main customer is the prison system and the VA.
Oh.
So it's not
I'm okay
just
with naming them. They've
Yeah.
been in the news a lot lately. We're talking about Echo Lake Foods. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So Racine, there's quite a few companies here. Twin Disc is another one.
And they're making what for what?
Transmission type and component parts. They're heavily a subcontractor, so doing parts versus complete vehicles. Their items go into someone else's.
And mostly military vehicles? Do you know what type?
I do not know what type.
Okay.
But it's trucks,
mostly
boats.
military. Oh, I see. Okay.
So there's quite a diversity. LDV out of Burlington does medical mobile units.
Oh yeah.
So again, a different type of vehicle, but
so that would be
specialized application.
So that would be an example in the case of LDV where they're giving a complete product, right? They're
Correct.
giving the whole vehicle.
Correct.
And Twin Disc is a different
as a components,
type.
correct.
C&H would be they're giving the entire piece of construction equipment.
For the most part.
So there's a whole array of places you can enter this. What makes, and I'm guessing the list, if you were to go outside of Racine County, the list has got to be really broad. I mean, somebody's supplying the government, I'm sure, with toilet paper.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And my guess is it might be one of the paper companies out of the Fox Valley.
Yeah. So, just throw some other examples out there. Literally everything, for example, the Defense Department uses.
Absolutely.
Someone is making and selling them.
Absolutely. Everything from of construction, medical equipment. GE is a large supplier of the state of Wisconsin for medical equipment.
Uh-huh.
Construction.
You mean doing the actual construction?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
VA hospital. A lot of buildings, hospitals, clinics.
Somebody must be supplying medicines to them,
absolutely.
for example.
Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
So there's a wide variety, everything from, we're sitting here, tables, chairs, lighting, video capabilities.
Oh, yeah.
Government buys all of
Yeah.
that, advertising, media,
Yeah.
publications.
Yeah.
So there's, once a company can identify where their market is, there's basically a market for almost, and I hate to say everything, but almost anything.
And you mentioned two examples, sort of research or intelligence-based examples right here in the case of MGA, was it? And
That was the
and Runtime?
Rensheimer. Rensheimer sets the per diem rates for the government.
Oh.
So
And what does MGA do?
They do the crash testing.
Oh, that was right. Yeah. So it's a service, or
It's a service.
So with that broad, limitless world almost of things the government buys from someone, what do you think makes a company a good candidate to perhaps be a supplier?
A good candidate to be a government supplier is a business that, there's two types. One is an established business that has the infrastructure to handle a government contract. Government contracts tend to be a little more burdensome to carry.
Mm-hmm.
The government tends to be a little bit intrusive as far as audits, visiting, making sure quality is up to par.
Which, by the way, is probably a very good thing.
It's all good things.
For the,
you don't
for
want
the taxpayer.
right. You don't want
Yeah.
the missile falling out of space or
Right.
anything like that.
Yeah, and also I'm sure it has something to do with trying to make sure the taxpayer dollars are spent
That the
well.
dollar is spent correctly.
Yeah.
We all read stories, good and bad,
Yeah.
on both sides.
Yeah.
But it is more of a burden, especially for a small business to carry.
Okay.
The second type of business that might have an opportunity is someone with an innovative idea or a new product. Okay, so whether you're looking at biotechnology there, or something that is energy saving, or something that might be a new lighting fixture, there might be a market for someone like that.
Oh, yeah.
But again, the company has to be able to handle the requirements of someone like a government customer. Cash flow, paperwork, that's all part of it. Rules, regulations, all that comes into play.
I can see where we are probably going to want to do this show in two parts. And I think this might be a pretty good place to let it rest.
Okay.
We're going to consider that part one.
Sounds
we'll
good.
pick it up next week.
Sounds
and
good.
You will be here again.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thanks for watching, and much more on obtaining government contracts and government work in part two.
Hi, I'm Matt Collins. I'd like to welcome you to Bob Weber Auto Mart on Douglas Avenue here in Racine, across from Douglas Park. We specialize in 1-year-old, low mileage, almost new cars. And if you'd like to stop by and see them, or see them on our website, bobweberautomart.com, we could save you between $5,000 and $10,000 on your next almost new car purchase.